Welcome to Not Just Ads, the show where B2B brands discover how creator-led content drives pipeline, builds trust, and grows long-term brand equity. Each episode, we speak with business leaders, founders, and creators who are defining their categories. I'm your host, Marcus Sherwin, and this is the creator economy for B2B. Hello and welcome today to Not Just Ads, the creator economy for B2B. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Jonathan Levanon. Jonathan has a seasoned career background in marketing, which I'm sure he'll share in a moment. I'm really excited to get into the conversation with him today. Jonathan, thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Marcus.
Great. Maybe you could tell us, how did you get into marketing? You've a really interesting background, so maybe you could just share with the audience how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so if I'm moving, fast forward, eventually I think my journey is equal to what I feel on my day-to-day life. Now I'll go backward and then, you'll understand why I mentioned that. So I have a strong background when it comes to engineering and data. Since, my early days as a kid, I always liked to analyze stuff and I like the numbers. And then, it was obvious for me that I'll be transitioning into computer science and then everything around that. I'd be working in Intel back then. For a couple of years, we're working on the WiMAX and 5G chips, the low-level stuff. Step by step, I keep thinking, and remember, that I kept thinking to myself, how interesting it will be for me, to take this level, this, I call it building blocks of data engineering and translate it into a very more sophisticated marketing part. Back then, the term growth wasn't even familiar to people. So I didn't even, mention this phrase to myself, but that's what I felt. So in my early days, I think my first business/marketing role was in Tabula when I joined as a project manager, but pretty fast forward, I translated and transitioned into becoming a salesperson. I was working a lot, in APAC region, North America, EMEA, all these territories. It was a great experience, and of a ride for me. I learned a lot. It's very important always, each person, that you have this station in your career that teach you lots of things that you'll kind of utilize and leverage afterward. So I believe Tabula was such a company for me. Step by step, I took all my business knowledge there and started to craft, while being there, more sophisticated deals. What does it mean? It means I always like to be the person, sometimes behind the scene, that does all those metrics within spreadsheets about our probability of gaining profit out of this deal. What's the expected forecast in profit 4 years ahead, and so on and so forth. I think these were actually the first steps in me doing growth marketing. Then I left Tabula, I ramped up my own company, I kind of merged it with the mother company afterwards. So I've been through some good stations in my career. In the last recent couple of years, I'm working for Sapiens. Sapiens is an insurtech company, sells platforms to insurers all around the world, insurers and reinsurers. Obviously, our platform meant to allow the insurers to become more efficient in what they do. Everything around the core platforms, policy, billing, and claims, everything around that is managed on our side. Plus, all the obviously required growth elements that are obvious in the recent years. Everything around digital, data, and AI is part of our platform. Behind the scene, that the backward keep making sure that our pipelines, specifically everything around digital channels, will keep growing. We are spread it across different territories, different line of business. And that's one of the challenges that I can talk about afterward. And that has been my journey so far.
Great. Yeah, no, really interesting journey. You mentioned earlier on as well that you were employee number 40. Is that right? When in Tabula back in 2013, so like nearly 13 years ago. What was it like then? Because ad tech was probably very different then than it is now as well. No, like the industry of ad tech was, I guess, mobile was becoming a priority, I suppose, for a lot of companies, but ad tech to some extent at that time was still kind of very much in its infancy. When you joined Tabula, did you, like, when you were looking at the market from growing a business like Tabula, what do you think were like some of the things that are even signals or some things that you kind of look at that you would say, okay, look, we're on the right track here? And do you think that those kind of like things have changed now or evolved over the last 10 years? Or do you think in marketing, the fundamentals are the same in terms of whatever you're doing, if you can link it to a business outcome, that's probably you're on the right track? Or do you think like that a lot has changed in those 30.
I think obviously it does, simply because things that I thought back then, to push into Tabula, and I got through walls. I got no, back then from our CEO or COO.
Yeah.
Now this is kind of the part of the majority business of Tabulas. The examples will always be around the traditional business, because Tabula
Yep.
traditional business was to work with publishers on one end, and on the other, with many advertisers. I always was the guy that kept thinking about how you can work on one deal for 1 or 2 years, but at the
Yep.
same day you crack it, then your gross revenue might increase by 1, 2, or 3%, 4%, instead of just adding more and more small pieces to the fire, I would say. So yeah, definitely it has been evolved. Mobile became a huge issue.
Yeah.
Everything around e-commerce became insane. These were the first e-commerce days. We almost forgot it, Justin, but e-commerce didn't start, before 2010 or 2012. Since Facebook and Meta obviously has been scaling since then. So this has been the beginning of the e-commerce, and I experienced it. Everything around, notifications, which wasn't utilized properly back then, is being much more utilized these days, and so on and so forth. So yes, this
Yeah.
kind of has been evolving so far. By the way, I think Tabula is a great company simply because it kept breaking its glass ceiling, since then, in order to gain more business that is actual, and not stick to this traditional business. So that's amazing.
Yeah. No, it's definitely cool as a company, and I think also the industry as well. Like if I think back to 2013, I was just getting into tech then, and I remember the big thing was around mobile, and a lot of like mobile affiliate companies and kind of pushing product offers and stuff. And it was, now when you think of it, that's matured, and how they measure and everything is matured as well. But at the time, it was very much like there was just an explosion of growth for a lot of companies, and they couldn't get talent fast enough as well. So it's definitely, I guess, the industry has expanded as well since then. But I'd love to talk a little bit about, from your time then after Tabula, you mentioned that you started your own business then as well, and you were in business for a while also.
Correct. I established a company, actually, joined together with one of the biggest companies in the world back then for that. It was acquired, by the way, afterward. And what we did was eventually, to bring up sophisticated content by analyzing what are the content or most discussed topics in the world every day. We had our, feeds and scrapers that were able, to figure out from the web what are the most discussed topics, what might, generate the highest CTR,
Sure.
and so on and so forth. And we gather all these parameters in order to create the most successful creative. So we've been generating, many creatives every day. And by looking after this perfect creative, by the way, this was also the beginning and the rise of videos. So we did lots of ads, not necessarily videos. The videos will just add afterward. And, by cracking those, we were able, to come up with very successful stories to our target audience or consume it. There were some days that we were able to bring hundreds of thousands of people to the same article, which was insane. This was growth, pure growth. It's like everything you do, morning till evening, it's like being meant to generate this most successful creative that will make people come to your website and stay and consume your content for not less than, I would say, 5 or 10 minutes. So all this funnel, top to bottom, was amazing. Obviously, I learned a lot. By the way, that also one of the things that made me become a huge fan of adopting B2C tactics and strategies to the B2B world.
Yeah.
Simply because I see no difference. Eventually, you do what you do on the marketing side to people on the other side. It doesn't really matter whether they consume it for themselves or consume it on behalf of the company they work for. So I'm a big fan of adopting that. This also led me, in my activities today. That was a hell of a journey as well. What can I say?
Yeah, it's certainly really interesting. With what you mentioned there, then, so what you were doing was you were basically looking at like kind of what topics were trending, and then you were creating kind of content around that. So it was kind of like a contextual, like, was it an ad network, or you were like a contextual publisher, or what way did the business work?
Correct. I was a publisher on a few websites. We grew up the brands back then via all social. We were working with a diversified type of channels, and anything from Meta, Yahoo back then, Tabula. I became one of Tabula clients back then.
Okay.
It was a funny story. Tabula, our brand, everything around there. Step by step, obviously, we added Snapchat. We started to work with TikTok. It was the early days of TikTok as well. So we were working with all those channels. aggressively with the main purpose, to bring value to our readers and to our
Yep.
audience. And at some point, I sold out these brands to other companies. I would finalize my chapter in this reality because I was fascinated also then by taking on those tactics and strategy and shift it and transition it into or assimilate it into the B2B world. Simply because we started to recognize that there are lots of challenges, I think, and wrong philosophies, in my opinion, in the B2B world that might prevent companies from doing pure roles, So that's what I've been doing since then. And
Yeah,
that's
right.
the obvious next station for me.
Interesting. So maybe you could share a little bit about Sapiens then. Like I know you shared that it's an insurance company, but in terms of like the markets that you're active in, the kind of the category, the specific category that Sapiens operates in, and maybe just for the audience that's not aware of the brand, that you could just share a little bit more.
Sure. Sapiens is a global company. Recently, we were public, by the way. We were recently acquired by a private equity. And so we are going back to become private again, which has its own advantages, obviously. Sapiens is global, around 5,000 to 6,000 people across the world. Our main product, as I mentioned before, is a digital transformation platform that we sell to insurer in order to accompany them and allow them, to make their transition, digital transformation process easier, I would say, in the next. So we operate in the life and pension line of business, life and annuities in North America, property and casualty, so-called PNC, and reinsuring. Those are our main line of businesses. And again, for all the insurers within those line of businesses, we provide a platform that allows them to become more efficient. A couple of examples will be, imagine a platform that allows you as insurer to issue more policies every day, that allows your brokers and agents to sell more policies every day, do more application, to do more simulations to the users on the other side. So that's what we sell them. On top of it, obviously, everything around digital data and AI, which is resulted with digital portals, chatbot AIs on the insurers' websites, and so on and so forth. Very strong base of headquarters in North America, very strong base across the UK, South Africa, Nordics, and some activity in APAC as well.
Okay.
That's about that.
So if I understand correct, then Sapiens basically, you enable, say, insurance companies to have that efficiency. So traditionally speaking, if you're doing a policy, you have to take like, let's say it's an insurance policy for health or something. You have to take in variables like your age, if you have any kind of life-threatening diseases, where you're from, so on. And then they create basically like a gauge of how much that's going to cost. With Sapiens technology, you make it more efficient for any resellers or the insurance company themselves to do that in a much more automated, efficient way. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, you allow either the insurers themselves or, the reps, MGAs, TPAs, all those names of agencies, obviously, and direct brokers and agents that work with them. Everyone that actually want, to bring business to them can also leverage our platform. So our platform has features that are not only to the insurers themselves, but also to MGAs, TPAs, brokers,
Gotcha.
agents, everyone in this world.
And so it's kind of like a white label solution, that you sell to different insurance companies then as well. Okay. And then, so from a marketing standpoint, then is it like it's purely B2B? So you're targeting kind of the, say, specific procurement teams in insurance companies, no?
Correct. It's important to differentiate or to be accurate. It's B2B because from our perspective, we sell obviously to other companies. But from features perspective and product perspective, obviously I would refer to it as B2B2C, simply because many of our features or major part out of them eventually meant, to give good service, level of service
Sure.
and improve satisfaction for the
Yep.
insurers, users, and clients. So it's important to differentiate between both. And yes, I manage the gross marketing element there, reporting to our CMO. I can elaborate about it.
Yeah. By all means. Yeah, that'd be really interesting because I think it's for people to get an understanding as well in terms of the B2B world of marketing and specifically in insurance of like the challenges that you see there. Like, because I guess insurance is a very regulated sector. So I like finance or anything like that. I imagine that there's restrictions, but also it's probably exciting as well in the sense of it's from, at least from outside, you don't necessarily see as massive disruptors come into the industry as fast in B2C as in B2B. So there's probably a lot of blue ocean, for want of a better word, in that area. So maybe you could just talk a little bit on that in terms of how you approach the market, and then from a B2B standpoint of like how you think about then when you're going into new markets and how you approach that from a B2B standpoint.
Yeah, I'll just emphasize that it varies, okay? It varies whether you are a startup, compared to whether you are SMB, small, medium business, compared to whether you are enterprises and a leading brand. Obviously, from Sapiens perspective, we are a leading brand, right? I mean, there are markets that we rule, there are line of businesses that we are either number first or second leading brand in those markets and line of business. So it really varies, you know. So for the audience on the other side, keep in mind that if you manage startup, it's very different whether than you manage SMBs or whether you manage an enterprise. Now, the most challenging B2B marketing obviously lays down on the enterprise side.
Yep.
Because usually it comes with high value tickets as well as very long sales cycle, usually
Yep.
1 year, 18 months as an average, which is, I think, the heart of the complication in this
Yeah.
business. Why? Simply because measurement and effectiveness become more and more hard to measure, right? I mean, if I sell you things face to face and you need to give me an answer within 2 minutes, that's an easy thing. I know either 0 or 1, either I did well or not. When it comes to 18 months that you try to talk and nurture your prospects throughout multiple touch points, with tons of different channels that you use, different people that they talk, it's not one-on-one, obviously, it's like many to many, and so on and so forth, then everything around attribution become more and more crucial and hard, obviously, to measure. So that's the huge challenge, and I believe that's one of the huge challenges that every B2B marketer with long sales cycle encounter. I invest lots of time around that, and I think that the solution for that starts by laying down very good and solid database or data foundations. Simply because, again, one of the challenges of 20 plus years old companies is the fact that they have lots of layers of data, as opposed to companies which are 10 or less years old, which usually, you know, have a very solid and hygiene database layers. This is also one of my challenges. Sapiens is 35 years old company. Obviously, we have many layers of data. We acquired 20 companies across the last decades, you know, and everything around that. Everything starts there. So part of what I'm doing is to make sure that our data is fully aligned, hygiene, because, you know, eventually that what allows automation and these days AI
Yep.
to run on top of this data and allow you to become more efficient, more fruitful, and more sophisticated. And that's the second, obviously, challenge. And that's something I mean the first challenge. Second challenge is everything around the fact that there are lots of noise in this world. And so sometimes as a marketer, you start to be confused. You know, you see all those tools. Many companies, you know, that I think the emerging startup scene was in the last 10 years, mainly around everything around marketing platforms. So as a VP that manages these areas, you get to know many technologies, many platforms, many people approach you. So you might be confused not to add all the noise from AI capabilities in the last couple of years. So at some point, you need to make sure that although there is lots of noise around you, you need to have a solid strategy, strict strategy, to make sure your teams execute with stability. At the same time, you need to make sure that you are not afraid to bring in new technologies and changes. And what
Yep.
does it mean eventually? Have a strategy, have the channels that you work with, have your platforms that you work with, MarTech stuff, but also have ongoing processes, internal processes that made you and the team to keep evaluating those every 3 months, I would say, every quarter, to evaluate their effectiveness, to evaluate each channel performance, to keep reviewing new technologies that are out there. Personally, you know, every week, I believe I have at least 2 to 3 demos with startup or new technologies companies, simply in order to make sure that I don't miss anything.
Hmm.
I have a third-party advisor, a guy that is specialist, you know, with AI. We were building agents in the last 6 months, just me and him at the background. Toward 2026, I bring, you know, I start to bring in this activity to my teams, and I call it an agent per employee. So each one of them will have an agent. But what was before that is a thorough research on my side and actually building those agents together with an expert for the last 6 months. So that's the way I manage things. That's the way I kind of navigate the noise in order to become more efficient and make my teams more efficient. Essentially, it's crucial to teach marketer, each leader will have his own, I would say, confidence in his strategy, but at the same time, we'll have this openness again in order to keep evaluating and checking with technologies and not be afraid of optimize. No,
Yeah.
not be afraid of optimize.
Yeah. I guess that's always the biggest challenge, isn't it? It's like there's so much change happening with so many different providers out there and so many different tools, whether it's with agentic AI or whether it's also with like kind of the RevOps movement now of like you have like tons of tools and figuring out which is best adapted to your tech stack, but also really that it's actually going to be effective in terms of making less work for you rather than training somebody on something and then it's obsolete or whatever. It's what do you do normally when you're looking at like bringing on new tools? And do you look at like kind of okay to see what it delivers and see if it's effective, or do you have like a kind of a certain type of what would I say, like a requirements that you're going to bring in, or like how do you determine between getting distracted by the noise versus actually seeing, is this actually going to make life easier? Is it going to make us more efficient? Is it going to make us faster at going to market, acquiring more clients? Or what's normally, do you have a framework, or what do you normally try to do in order to avoid falling into the latter of like noise rather than making sure that it's actually effective for the business?
Yeah, so we have a full process, I would say, new platforms deployment process. Everything starts from the need and from the understanding whether are we actually meeting this new technology. Meaning, if I integrate and assimilate this new technology into my teams, will it actually allow me to generate more, increase the pipeline, generate more leads, improve efficiency, and so on and so forth? Why it is important? Because not always the answer is yes. If you're a specific team, it's lacking of capabilities, to leverage the current technology. So even if you bring in the most leading new technologies in the world, it definitely won't help. It will only make them, go backward because they won't have time or sophisticated enough in order to adopt it. So that's the first question you should ask. This, along with the need, always make me talk to companies and technologies that I believe that might be fruitful for me. Second phase will always be proof of concept. Usually in our life, we reach to the point where the platforms that we are looking at are not necessarily off-the-shelf platforms. They will always need to do some tailor-made work for us in order to adapt our full funnel, sales process, and so on and so forth. And so we usually have like 4 to 8 weeks proof of concept where we keep reviewing them, checking them, making sure that we get everything we need out of it. And then usually I will never sign, as a tip, for the audience, I will never sign for the first time I work with the platform for more than 1 year, 1 year contract, simply to make sure that we didn't miss it, that the teams will know how to learn, that the onboarding process will be okay, because many platforms know how to sell to you, but don't know how to support the onboarding process. So usually we give 1 year for the sake of checking how fruitful was the deployment of this platform. And afterward, if it works, we always make sure to take our collaboration to the next level by leveraging our account support. The teams work with the hours that we invest. We usually upgrade the contracts, long-term contracts, and so on and so forth. So that's the discipline around deploying new MarTech in my teams. We have just for you to know, we have, I think, almost 40 different platforms that we work with.
Wow, right.
Out of our MarTech platform and tools, obviously, not all of them are a dozen of double figures platforms, but many of them are some tools, but we have around 40. Everything is connected together with Salesforce and HubSpot being our building blocks for that, with data and AI running on top of everything in order to reflect us the numbers and the performance. And we are keep improving it. So that's what we handle on the MarTech side. Very sophisticated. And again, as I mentioned, you must keep optimizing, because what's relevant then not necessarily will be relevant.
Yeah, for sure. What's your opinion about automation then, in terms of like, there's so many vendors and so many suppliers on the market. And if you look on LinkedIn, you believe that like you can just automate everything and, the business will run on its own. And I think if you're a practicing marketer like yourself, you see that the reality is not the case. Like there is a huge benefit of a lot of tools, but that there's some limitations and so on. But from your experience kind of post AI since like the last 3 years, do you see that like automation is actually helping people become more effective marketers, or do you think there's a bit of noise there as well, like that there's a bit of distraction, like that there is limitation to some of these automation tools, and that you do need humans in there, like as the deal size is bigger and that there's more complexity with the integration or whatever it may be on a client side? Or do you see actually, no, automation is something that's untapped. If you get it right, that can help you scale even further. Like what, and I know maybe there's no right or wrong answer here. Every case is dependent, but I'd just be interested to hear from your point of view of do you think it's something that is effective, or do you think that there's limitations there?
Automation for enterprises such as Sapiens, as the main purpose from my perspective, is to make your work better organized,
Yeah.
cross function and cross
Yep.
company organized, and make sure that you are able to attribute properly what you do. When you talk about startups, automation meant, to allow them easy ramp up and easy product fit testing, sales desk testing, and so on and so forth. So again, huge difference between startup and enterprises. On my side, for every platform these days that I will add, I'll probably consolidate and retire to other platforms that we use, simply because eventually there is a capacity, and I don't want the team, to keep working with new platforms and new technologies without consolidating what they already do. I must say that there are very good platforms out there, but it doesn't mean that you can use all of them. We
Yeah.
literally, for every platform that we think to add, we kind of retire to others and embed their features within the new one. That's one. Second thing I wanted to mention is the fact that, let me see how to phrase it. When I look about platform, when I, make my time available to talk to founders or to company leaders, I always look for platform that doesn't just speak their product message to me. I look for platforms that know how to speak my pain points. I call it, if I see an ad that talks about topics that I dream about and prevents me, to go to sleep early, and you are the right company for me to talk to, because it means that you understand my pain point and not just, keep saying the sales deck of here is my product and here are my messages. By the way, we also apply the same on Sapiens when we do growth and messages. And that's very important. That's the way I know whether you, as a company leader or founder, actually has the right technology for me, that you understand my pain points, or not necessarily.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think the ones that are really good at that are like kind of have the category entry points locked down of like what are the pain points and how their products, rather than going about features, it's really what they're helping people solve. So for if we look at like kind of B2B, you've been in it for a number of years. What do you see like the big trends in the future in B2B, particularly automation? Obviously, we discussed now. Tech stacks are getting bigger and bigger. There's so much out there. If you take a step back from that though and look at like kind of trends of what you see, where you see the future going, where you see value being added, like as a marketer, and either tools or how they can help you do that. What do you see the future is in B2B?
I think, what I mentioned before, everything around taking B2C marketing elements and assimilate it and migrate it into B2B marketing elements are crucial, and keep doing it every day. I encourage it. I like to see other marketers that do the same, simply because it generates results. And lots of marketers are avoid doing so simply because they want and they prefer not to change, other than change and give explanations to the senior management or to the board. So that's my first, I think, forecasting, and I think we just keep seeing it increasing and increasing. It's about full attribution and full alignment, cross functions or cross company. Simply because, again, for enterprises with strong sales cycle, this becomes crucial. People must understand it's no longer, either my teams, the salesperson, the CEO, is product. It's no longer like one-to-one. It's not that the person will knock the door, step into the CEO, shake hands, and there will be a deal. It's like many to many. You need to do the growth on the messages side, on the growth side. You need to do the meetings on the sales side. You need to do the product sessions and the workshops on the product side. And obviously you need senior management to maintain the relationship. So it's like many to many. We just keep seeing it increasing, as long as you're talking about high ticket values and long sales cycle. So I think both things, or actually three things, many to many, full funnel attribution and transparency, and B2C elements into B2B, will define marketing in the next, I would say, 2, 3 to 4 weeks. AI on top of it, but AI will be on top of anything that we do.
Yeah.
So it's kind of goes without saying, AI on top of it, that will allow us to become more efficient and more better in what we do. So don't just run to add automation, because it's its own limit and disadvantages. Make sure that you add what's the right thing for you, and make sure you know that you do it in your own pace.
Yeah. Any particular types of tools that you've discovered recently that you're like, this is really useful, whether it's for working with your team, the business, yourself personally, anything you're using that is maybe not that well known, but that you're like, this saves me a huge amount of time, or it's really helps me do my job better, or anything you've discovered recently?
Yeah, so I encountered a platform named qualify.com. I'm happy to mention them here.
Yep.
Hopefully, we are about to sign with them. We still didn't work with them. We are going to replace our entire chatbot mechanism on the website with them. We are going to leverage their platform in order to leverage AI capabilities when it comes to database nurturing, to allow us to do better nurturing, better personalized messages crafting, and so on and so forth. Everything is AI based. I encountered them. It's very professional to me. We tested them for a few months, and I'm looking forward to move forward with them. This is one. B, everything around signaling tools, again, become more and more important because it allows you as a marketer to be accurate. I didn't mention it, but leveraging intent signals is a core thing that we do on my side. And we used to feed, the rest of the marketing organization and sales, NSD with those intent signals. So everything around that, we have a couple of tools that we use. I'm not going to drill into names. There are many of them, by the way, but tools that allows you to do keywords intent recognition based on the keyword search, or whether your prospects or accounts, targeted accounts, talk to your competitors, social, tracking their social behavior, so you know what's the right time and whether they become in market or not. Everything around the intent signaling family is extremely crucial, and we do it a lot.
Yeah. Well, and in your opinion, are there any particular channels then that you see are kind of like underutilized? So, like, I know, say, some of the trends, obviously LinkedIn is a massive channel for B2B, but any other channels that you're working with that you find useful, or that you predict that it's actually in the next couple of years, this is going to be much more of a prominent B2B channel? I know that's one that I hear of quite a lot, but I'd be interested from your side. I'll share it as well. Reddit, I hear a lot about, that people find it quite useful with the subreddits and stuff. But I wonder, just from your own opinion, if there's any, obviously LinkedIn we mentioned, but like any other channels that you think that can be quite useful for B2B as well.
I think influencers, I think B2B in their set of mind kind of put influencers at the side. I think that's extremely important. You need to do it cleverly, simply because your prospect doesn't want to see you pay someone to talk
Yeah,
about your product. So you need to craft and better understand the business model here. But influencers, I think, very important, and the level of the relationships and product recommendations. That's A. B, I think less than a channel, it's more about the type of content that a B2B company needs to create. Companies need to stop thinking about just saying their messages and talking about pain points they saw. They need to make sure they create this kind of content, shareable content, I call it, that allow prospects on the other side and clients to share their messages for them. This eventually will take companies to the next phase, other than, just keep generating leads, keep converting them
yeah,
into meetings. This kind of wrap everything up and allows you as a company to reduce sales cycle lengths and
yeah.
improve win rate. I call it to bring easy wins. If companies know how to do that, I think that's a huge win. I think that's a must. Definitely companies don't do it enough.
Sorry.
Well, very full in my home,
Oh
so
wow.
no,
Yeah,
don't
we have a
them.
we have a 15-month-old and one on the way. So I can imagine four is a whole other story.
We can spend another 5 hours just to talk about that.
Yeah, no, it's fun, but he has a lot of energy. But I'd love to talk. So when you were mentioning as well, it's really interesting point what you say about the content piece around kind of education. A lot of things now we see, and probably over the last, say, 16 months or so, with like thought leader ads on LinkedIn, and a lot of companies are leaning into this. Have you seen it being effective for you specifically with like kind of your type of audience in the insurance industry? Or are you seeing, like, I guess there's two trails of thought. One is like kind of the founder led and the VP C-suite kind of led content. And then obviously is the creator, what you mentioned as well, but making sure that the context is right and everything. From what you see, do you see C-suite? Is it effective in terms of actually gaining education and kind of raising their ears, should we say, to the audience that you go after, of like having say, everyone from C-suite in front of the camera or making kind of points around kind of the industry, sharing their points of view. Is that as effective as running, say, lead gen campaigns was a number of years ago, in your opinion?
Yeah, so unfortunately in Sapiens, we don't do it enough. That's the reality. We plan to do it more. We don't do it enough. So I cannot come, with concrete, I would say, figures about it from the inside. But that's another element, that's another simply B2C element that B2C companies have been doing,
Yep.
in the last 10 years that
Yeah.
I think that is totally missing, on the B2B side. I see companies around me, I'm not going to mention names, but leading companies in the world, B2B companies, usually young companies, do it and leverage it. This is why I'm a big believer of it. This is why we allocated relatively a significant budget toward 2026 to do so. It's not only about, C-suite level in front of the camera. It's about providing your audience some cool quizzes, some cool, play, what my profile is about, this kind of stuff that they will smile and share it. Eventually, if you think about it, Marcus, when they see an ad with your product messages or pain points, at the worst case scenario, they skip it. At the best case scenario, they click and leave their details,
Yeah.
which is fine. But
Yeah.
if we see this potential shareable content in front of them, at the worst case scenario, they will review it. At the best case scenario, they will share it with others, and the effect, this share effect, it will be huge for you again as a company looking years ahead. This will help you to become a leading brand because you will be in people, I would say, back of the mind that you are the leader, that you are real for them, that you are innovative, as long as your shareable content reflects innovation. And simply the trick is what's this specific content and how to do so. But I'm a big believer in it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's so many industries that aren't leaning into it yet. There's a huge opportunity there, and obviously being creative around the type of content that engages people. B2B in the many sectors is like ripe for disruption in that and it's like what you say earlier, like there's so many great examples from B2C that can be used in B2B because at the end of the day, it's humans you're selling to. Okay, there's a couple of humans that are making the decision in B2B, but at the end, the fundamentals are very similar to B2B.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we also leverage a platform. Most of the ads, I would say, ad networking platform for B2B marketers will always go after the account level. But in the recent 5 to 10 years or 5 years, you already see B2B platforms and go after the person level. So it's another thing around that, taking B2C elements and make the transition into B2B.
Yeah. Any B2B companies that you see, not necessarily direct competitors or anything, but like B2B companies that you're excited or you think that they're actually doing some pretty cool marketing, any ones that kind of come to mind that you've seen, whether it's their approach or even the content that they run or anything that you find interesting?
Yeah, obviously the company Wiz, I assume you know them.
Say again, sorry?
Wiz, you
Yes,
familiar
of
with?
course. Yeah.
They do a cloud cyberin, obviously.
Yep.
And what they do is extremely amazing. I think that was a major part of their steps to success. Obviously, the leadership is amazing as well, but
Yeah.
was backed up with
Wix
I
is
think,
the website. They on
not
WordPress.
Wix, no,
No,
no, no,
no.
WIZ, not Wix.
UIZ. Okay. Yeah.
The one that was acquired by Google recently by more than $30
Yes.
billion.
Yep. Yeah.
So if you look about on their marketing, it's amazing. And keep
Yeah.
following up all the marketing leaders. Nothing but amazing. I think they pushed this company to success from day maybe two. And I learned a lot from them. There are a couple of more companies that I track, that embed big elements within their B2B marketing. By the way, it doesn't only goes, to the ads or to the growth and digital side of the business. It's also relevant for events, the way you deploy events. It's also relevant for the way you deploy webinars. It's more or less, relevant for the way you refer to all your channels and not only on the digital side. Digital is just an element, obviously, that helps you
Yeah.
to reach out to faster, and to broader audience.
Yeah. Well, I used to work with I think they got acquired by SAP, but WalkMe, you're probably aware of WalkMe. I believe they're acquired by SAP recently, but it was a few years ago. During my days in LinkedIn, they used to do a lot of interesting stuff around even like kind of commercial ads and stuff like that. And for a very B2B product, the way they would approach that was like a very B2C way. And I thought it was really interesting how they approached it, and it got a lot of engagement.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah. Jonathan, it was a pleasure talking with you, channels.
Mostly in LinkedIn, obviously. feel free to approach me there. I'll just finish, if you have 1 more minute, Marcus. Remember about the fast forward that I said about the way how I feel usually that my day-to-day life is equal to the growth process. So I'll just wrap everything we discuss. I'll just
Yeah.
wrap it up and say that eventually as a person, I think every person, but that's what I feel about myself. You always, looking for new experiments. You testing stuff. You evaluate it, and then you decide whether to let it go or to keep scaling it. And if you
Yeah.
scale it, you'll keep optimize it again and again and again. And you keep saying everyone around you, your wife, your friends, your kids, and so on and so forth, about why you should think they should leverage it and the way they should refer to it. So I think it's equal to growth. That's what I'm doing on my daily basis. So
Yeah.
grasp
Well,
everything.
have you always been like that, or was that something that you developed over time in your career? Or like what I think for anyone listening as well, from a practical standpoint, like I know that you're saying, and it makes total sense what you're saying, but I think from anyone listening, if they're like maybe doing their job or whatever, and yes, there is some level of experimentation and they can trial certain things, but from a practical standpoint, how would you encourage them to be more active in that part of experimentation? Any books or any podcasts or anything that you read that kind of goes, okay, that actually helps me. Why don't I think of this more objectively? How, I guess the best thing is by doing, but like anything else that you recommend to people that want to get more active in experimentation?
I think each person should have a few person, that he likes to listen to. You learned a lot from listening to people consistently and not just jumping from a person to the other. I have person, on the finance side, on the stock side, on the marketing side, I have a few leaders that I'm tracking. And as you mentioned, just embrace changes and experiments. Don't be afraid. And, go with your truth. Eventually it will work.
Makes a lot of sense. Jonathan, thanks very much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you very much, Marcus.